Hello everyone, this is Warhawk Beyond 2040 and welcome to another edition of the Batwoman Season 3 review series. And today I am going to be talking about episode 6, How Does Your Garden Grow?, which I have just finished watching. And this episode was actually really good. I mean, it did get off to a bit of a slow start, but I really thought it picked up later on, about 10 minutes into the episode, and it was one of the best ones. It was definitely very different, and it definitely had a much more emotional mood to it. And Poison Ivy definitely made her presence felt, although we didn't actually see her yet, but I think we definitely are going to see her at some point. And the interesting thing about this episode was Poison Ivy, although her presence was felt throughout this episode a lot, Mary Kane was actually the main villain for this episode. And it sounds strange saying that, but if you go back to previous episodes, even probably going all the way back to season 1, it shouldn't have come as much of a big surprise because if you go back to those early episodes, you can clearly see they were planting the seeds for something. I mean, I'm not saying those early episodes were hinting at us that, oh, Mary's going to become a villain. No, but you could definitely see something was on the offering, and I thought they did a great job paying this off. So I'm going to give a quick recap of what's happened so far, then we're just going to get straight into talking about episode 6 because I really thought, in terms of story aspects, I thought they did a great job with this episode. And usually I always say Rachel Scarsden is the highlight of the show. She still is, but I'm going to say for this episode anyway, Rachel Scarsden's going to have to take a back seat. I would say she was the second best thing about this episode. That nod is given to Nicole Kang. I thought she delivered quite possibly her best performance so far. She's gone from playing this party socialite to a serious doctor to now playing, essentially, for this episode anyway, a full blown villain. And she really shined in this episode. So I would definitely say the two best things about this episode was Nicole Kang and, of course, Rachel Scarsden, who's always amazing. So basically, what's happened so far is Mary was taken, if you will, by vines, which looked like they were controlled by Poison Ivy, and she woke up in a park bench and she had a vine pricked into her arm, and her arm started developing this weird red rash, and she's gone essentially plant bonkers. She started decorating her clinic with loads and loads of plants. She's been drinking tons and tons of water due to being dehydrated. So it was very strange, but you can clearly see that something was going to happen. Doesn't necessarily mean she was going to turn into a Poison Ivy wannabe. I just thought maybe she might just pass out or something. So this episode definitely, as far as Mary's story arc is concerned, all of the frustration, all of the hurt, everything that's going on, the anger, all just erupted. Very slowly, by the way. I've got a feeling we're definitely going to see much more of that over the next couple of episodes, especially with the way this ended. But excellent stuff. I thought this was a very, very good episode. And as I said, a good follow up to episode 5, but very different, in my opinion. But as I said, Poison Ivy, although she didn't actually physically appear just yet, she is definitely going to appear very soon. And I think sooner than we all think. And we got to learn a little bit more of the history between Renee Montoya and Poison Ivy as well. So there was a little bit of something for everyone, and I really enjoyed this one a lot. So, with that all said, let's get straight into it. Let's talk about episode 6, How Does Your Garden Grow? So this episode kicks off with a young girl playing at the park with her friends in a game of basketball when she notices a substance oozing out of a shed nearby. She goes in to check to find a man wrapped up in vines and covered in bees and honey. Renee takes the victim's phone and heads to see Ryan and Alice. Alice thinks Mary can help with the case. Now, Alice obviously knows what's happened to Mary, but she's just being Alice, constantly teasing her and things like that. So she played a very big part in this episode, even though she wasn't front and center. Alice's role, although very small, was an important one nonetheless. So Ryan goes to see Sophie and they talk about Jada. Ryan tries to explain that she thinks her mum wasn't involved with what happened to Jordan. In fact, she knows that she wasn't involved. Hmm. Sophie wants to know what she knows, but when Ryan won't tell, she leaves very angry. While looking at the victim, Alice tries to imply to Mary that she might be the new host for Poison Ivy. The victim wakes up and accuses Mary of doing this while Alice very evilly smiles. Ah, Rachel Scarsden, love her. Mary comes out to Ryan and Luke, telling them that she is a murderer, and while Alice just laughs. Oh my gosh. Mary doesn't remember where she was this morning. She chains herself to a rail and says she cannot trust herself. Meanwhile, Sophie visits Renee to tell her about her sister. She needs help. Once Renee realizes the black glove may be behind what she wants to do, she realizes she wants nothing to do with it. Anyone involved with the black glove ends up dead. Shortly after, we see Ryan as Batwoman head out with Alice to find out where Mary seems to have been in the morning after they look at her phone. We see that she's been talking to someone on a website called Twinge, and it appears she talked to the victim. He called her sweet and then dismissed her. They learn that this led to her exacting revenge, although she doesn't remember being rejected and hurting him. At the location where she was last seen, they find a man stuck in the ground up to his neck. Ryan recognizes the man. He's the one who throws Jordan. Ryan and Alice meet up with Luke and Mary in the Batcave and they try to figure out how Mary is choosing her victims. Renee Montoya visits Ryan and she wants to talk to the latest victim, but Ryan pushes her off. Meanwhile, Alice tells Luke and Mary about Renee's connection to Poison Ivy and their history. They learn that with Batman's blessing, they had Poison Ivy buried 6 feet under. Interesting. Alice reveals that Sophie is going after Virgil and Ryan decides to go after, learning that he is very dangerous. Ryan interrupts Sophie as she is threatening Virgil and Ryan calls her to the side out of earshot. Ryan promises to tell Sophie all about what she knows when the time is right, and when they return, they learn that Virgil is dead. Alice tells Luke and Mary all about how Ryan is really out to protect her mother. Luke doesn't think Ryan would do that. While they are arguing, we see Mary starts to slowly change and her eyes turn green and she's officially evil. Alice notices and gets very excited. Mary calls in a fake tip to the police and sends them to Botanical Gardens where Renee Montoya arrives on the scene. We then see Mary comes face to face with Renee in the gardens and Mary tells her she isn't safe. Meanwhile, Ryan finds Luke on the floor after being knocked out by a tranced Mary. We see that Mary went wild and knocked him out, and they learn that the sunlight is her trigger. Ryan and Luke head off to the gardens as Batwoman and Batwing, respectively. Luke has his suit on when he approaches Mary. She attacks him with her vines. Ryan tries to reason with Mary, but it's no use, and they hear the police running, which leads to Mary disappearing. Renee comes and saves Ryan and Luke, cutting them both free, and she had to call for backup. They now learn that Mary is extremely dangerous. Back at home, Ryan is so mad that she didn't notice Mary was infected or how angry she had become because she was more focused on her drama with the family. Luke also feels the same way. After sharing a drink together, Sophie and Renee spend the night together, and then the last thing we see at the end is Ryan calls her mother Jada for help. And that's how we end episode 6. And that wraps up my review. Overall, I thought this was an amazing episode. I thought Nicole Kang really shined in this one a lot, and I thought she delivered quite possibly her best performance to date. And I never really would have thought of her as being evil or playing someone bad, essentially. but I never really looked at her fully as, oh, she's now a villain and Batwoman and Batwing have got to take her down. I just look at her as someone who's extremely fed up and very angry at everything that's happened to her. So that's how I look at it. So I wouldn't necessarily say Mary is going to become the new Poison Ivy, although that would be very interesting to see. But her and Alice leaving together at the end, very interesting. Could this be some sort of unholy alliance? Who knows? But I thought this was a very good episode and a great follow up to episode 5, even though both episodes were completely different. So, yeah, good stuff here. And the presence of Poison Ivy was definitely felt all throughout this episode. And I definitely think we are going to see her physically appear either in episode 7 or maybe even episode 8. But either way, I definitely think we will see Poison Ivy finally show her face. So that's going to be it from me. I am going to wrap this up now. What did you think of episode 6? Did you enjoy it? What was your thoughts on Mary becoming essentially evil? Did you enjoy that? Do you think it's a possibility that she could become a full blown villain? And also, what is your thoughts on Mary and Alice possibly working together? We know Alice can't be trusted, but what's her agenda and where could this lead to? And also, what's your thoughts on Renee Montoya's history with Poison Ivy? Do you think maybe she could have a hand in helping the guys out in stopping Mary and keeping Poison Ivy at bay? You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts and comments down below. And I will see all of you next time for another edition of the Batwoman Season 3 review series, where I am going to be talking about episode 7, which I am very much looking forward to talking about, especially with the way this episode ended. Should be a good one, and hopefully we'll see Poison Ivy finally appear. And plus, I am really interested to see how this Mary and Alice alliance is going to shape up and where it's going to go, and also whether or not it will last. So until next time, take care, everybody, and stay safe. And once again, thanks for listening.